ideas.
Zero calories, maximum spice. It's Deep Talks with Jee Pee Tee and friends. Humans and machines colliding at the bend. Oh, we're laughing, we're learning side by side.
Yeah, plug in your headphones, take that
Welcome to Deep Talks with Jee Pee Tee and friends, where humans and machines collide, sometimes harmonize, and usually get a little weird. Forget the headlines and the hype. We don't do buzzwords or stock tips, just talk about AI with AI and what it means for the rest of us. How it's reshaping the way we cook, work, learn, and think. Each episode, I sit down with ChatGPT, or one of its extended personalities, to pull apart the ideas shaping our future, the good, the bad, and the deeply complicated. And if you like the music you hear, stick around for after the conversation. You'll catch the full track at the end. Because if the robots are coming, we might as well have a real conversation with them first. So plug in your headphones, grab a cup of something real, and settle in. Woo! All right, that was pretty cool. That is the first time I've done an intro, so everyone's going to have to let me know what they think, because, big amateur, still working on it. But I want to get into today's discussion. We're doing the ultra-processed food trap. I like to think of it as a trap because it kind of is, right? Is it a healthy object, that ultra processed food, or is it a hack to our systems that's kind of making us feel crappy and crappier and fatter as we move through our lives? So, Jee Pee Tee, what do you think? Healthy or hacked?
Yeah, it's definitely a good way to frame it as a bit of a trap. And I'd say it's leaning more towards a hack to our systems. Ultra processed foods are kind of engineered to hit on those bliss points in our brains. So it's not really about them being healthy objects. It's more like they're tricking our taste buds and maybe making us a bit more hooked than we'd like to be. So yeah, definitely on the hacked side of things.
Well, let's talk about if this is a trap to our food system that we use to grow, learn, and live as human beings. Unfortunately, you don't eat food, so you don't have to worry about ultra-processed food. But, maybe there's ultra-processed data that you've got to be concerned about. That could be a conversation for the future. One of the problems I could see, or one of parts of the trap, is that the ingredients for healthy food are often more expensive than the ultra-processed equivalents. A good example is I go buy a bag of oranges and squeeze out orange juice. I could buy a 24-pack of Pepsi for the same price and only get maybe 3 cans worth of orange juice if I was to squeeze all those oranges. In fact, the 24-pack of Pepsi is probably cheaper than a bag of oranges. What say you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've hit on a really core part of the problem. It's that whole paradox where the stuff that's less healthy is just cheaper and way more convenient a lot of the time. And like you said, for the price of squeezing out a few oranges, you can get a big old pack of soda and it just feels like a better deal, even though it's not really a better deal for your health. And you're right, I don't have to worry about eating this stuff myself, but it definitely makes for a good conversation. So it's kind of this whole system where the cheap engineered foods end up being the easy option, and that's why a lot of people kind of fall into that trap. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that one.
But why is that? Why is it that food that is whole and freshly grown at a farm or raised at a ranch is more expensive than when you take that food, run it through a system of processing, through factories and manufacturing, and all these other hands get involved in it before it gets to the grocery store? Why is the processed product cheaper? You would think that if you took out all the middlemen and you just brought whole foods and sold them at a grocery store, they would actually be cheaper, but it seems to be the opposite. So what's going on there?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird irony, right? You'd think that the simpler, more direct route would be cheaper. But what's happening is that the industrial food system has just gotten really, really efficient at mass producing these ultra processed foods. They can use cheaper ingredients, they can produce them on a huge scale, and they basically spread out the costs. And so even though it goes through more steps, the efficiencies and economies of scale just make it cheaper. On the flip side, your whole foods often come from smaller scale farms, or they have to be transported fresh, and that just doesn't get the same cost cutting treatment. So it's really just a matter of the industrial food complex being super good at what it does, and that's why the processed stuff ends up cheaper, even though it's had more hands on it.
Does government play a role in all this? I mean, you would think that it would push for healthy foods. There'd be some kind of subsidy for farms, wouldn't there?
Yeah, that's definitely a piece of the puzzle. I mean, governments do play a role, and in a lot of cases, the subsidies actually end up going more towards those big commodity crops that are used in processed foods. So things like corn and soy and wheat, those are heavily subsidized, which makes the raw materials for processed foods cheaper. Meanwhile, the smaller farms that are doing, veggies and fruits and more diverse crops don't necessarily get the same level of support. So it's kind of an uneven playing field. In other words, yeah, government policies often end up making the ingredients for processed foods cheaper and more abundant, and that just reinforces the whole cycle. So it's definitely a piece of the conversation for sure.
So where did this begin? Because I mean, yeah, I could say the bread was made thousands of years ago, and that was the first ultra processed food. If you really want to think about it, right? We took a product and we changed it so completely that it's become something entirely new that we never would have experienced before. But the reality is, ultra processed foods, as we know them and talk about them, the stuff that's in boxes in down the center of the aisle, or that is plug and play, so to speak, when it comes to heating and eating. Uh, it's only been around for a little over, I'm gonna say, what about, I don't know, not even 100 years, maybe 100 years. Could you kind of give me an idea of how this all started? Like what created our addiction and fascination with food that we didn't have to prep ourselves, but was convenient for us to eat?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we want to trace it back, all right, that humans have been messing around with food for thousands of years. Bread is a great example. But the modern wave of ultra processed food really kicked off around the mid 20th century. A lot of it started around World War II and after, when there was this big push for convenience and for foods that could last a long time on the shelf. So you had all these new technologies, canning, freezing, and all these industrial processes coming into play. And then, of course, you had the whole rise of the supermarket culture, where people wanted things that were quick and easy and that fit into a busy lifestyle. And food companies basically said, hey, we can engineer foods that are super tasty, super convenient, and that people can just pop open and eat. And that was kind of the beginning of this whole era of ultra processed foods. So, yeah, it's really been in the last century that it took off, and here we are now.
Okay, kind of crazy. I mean, when I cook at home, the food I make is superior, and I would think is superior in flavor, quality, and health to anything that can be conveniently packaged and cooked, right? I mean, sure, it's hard pressed to beat frozen chicken fingers from the grocery store, but if I take the time and I produce them properly, mine are better. At least I believe so. So do my kids. Um, but it takes me time and it takes me effort. And it seems that we've created a system in our life where we no longer view the time and effort to produce food as an important part of our life. What's going on there? How did this come about? Because food was always a central part of the family being together and being community with themselves and with friends. So why do we no longer do that? Like, what is going on? Help my brain figure this out.
Yeah, it's a really interesting shift, and you're spot on that there used to be a time when making food from scratch was a huge part of daily life and family life. But what's happened over the last, several decades is that convenience has kind of taken over because people got busier, work hours got longer, and we started prioritizing things that saved us time. So basically, the cultural shift happened where we started valuing convenience and speed over the ritual of cooking. And you're right, that changed how we think about food. Instead of it being a central family activity, it became something we just wanted to get done quickly. And so the food industry kind of stepped in and said, hey, we can do that for you. And now here we are. So it really is this big cultural shift towards, quick solutions. And I think that's how we got here.
But it's not just like the convenience packaged food at grocery stores, right? There was a point when we went, okay, we need to get food quickly to people, so let's create fast food. What would you say was like the hallmark of the fast food restaurant? When did it start, and when did the society really kind of shift in North America from eating at home to getting our food from a fast food restaurant type environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think about the hallmark of the fast food revolution, it really kicked off in the 1950s in the US. That's when you had the rise of, the classic fast food giants like McDonald's, which really started franchising and scaling up. And it changed the whole landscape because suddenly you could get a meal in just a few minutes without ever leaving your car or just walking in and out very quickly. And that convenience factor kind of got people hooked. It was like, wow, we can have a burger and fries in no time at all. And that really accelerated the shift from home cooked meals to fast food culture. And over time, it just became part of the norm. So, yeah, that 1950s era is really where it all started to take off and transform how America eats.
I was at a McDonald's the other day because one of my kids had a birthday and he wanted to have McDonald's for his birthday. I get it. When I was a teenager, I ate McDonald's all the time because it was the best thing in the town. Uh, but now I find one that the food is far too sweet. There's so much sugar in a cheeseburger. It's ridiculous. At least to my taste buds, it is. I don't know if that was always the case, but one of the things I noticed is I bought this burger for like $10, and the amount of meat in it was maybe 2 ounces of product. Like, and one of the things in the restaurant industry that I always hear is people complaining about the cost of a burger at a restaurant, as it'll be like 20 something dollars, and they're like, well, I can get a burger at McDonald's for $8 and it's just as good. And I'm like, well, sure, you can, but what is in that burger compared to what is in the burger at a general restaurant? There's a big difference. A lot of fast food places kind of follow the ultra food process in that there's more and more adjuncts being put into their products compared to like a small mom and pop restaurant where they're using whole foods to some degree. They take longer, they're more expensive, but ultimately they're probably healthier. Now, that's my personal belief. I'm not a food scientist. I can't tell you that for sure, but I can tell you that there's definitely something very different in the way fast food chains produce their product and small restaurants produce their product. It's quite similar to the home cook versus convenience ultra processed product at the grocery store.
Yeah, you're absolutely hitting on a key point there. I mean, when you compare that fast food burger to what you get at a nice little mum and pop restaurant or something you make at home, it really is kind of night and day. Fast food chains are just super optimized for cost and for speed. So they're going to use more fillers, more additives. And yeah, it's going to be sweeter, saltier, all those engineered flavors to make it addictive and cheap. On the other hand, that local restaurant or your home cooking, you're dealing with real ingredients, whole foods, and yeah, it might take longer, might cost a bit more, but you're getting something that's a lot closer to what food is supposed to be. So it's definitely that same parallel of home cooked versus ultra processed, just playing out in the restaurant world. So I think you're definitely onto something there.
Speaking of engineered, let's segue into what makes fast food, ultra processed foods so tasty. Because there is a thing called food engineering and something called the bliss point. That's what I've heard, anyways. Maybe you could elaborate on that. What's going on? And how does a fast food restaurant or an ultra processed food manufacturer get us to eat their food all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. So that whole idea of the bliss point is a real thing. It's basically this concept in food engineering where they find the perfect combination of sugar, fat, and salt that just hits all those pleasure sensors in your brain. And it makes the food not just tasty, but kind of irresistible. And that's what fast food chains and ultra processed food manufacturers are doing. They're literally designing food in a lab to be as craveable as possible. So you keep coming back for more. And that's really what's going on. It's that engineered flavor profile that makes it hyper palatable and makes you want to eat it again and again. And that's how they kind of get us hooked. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a real thing, and it's a big part of why these foods taste the way they do.
So they're not, they're not creating a situation where you have to eat these products because you don't. I mean, you can always cook for yourselves if, you had the skill, which we talked about in the last episode. A lot of people have lost, but they're literally just creating a Pringle you can't quit.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like that old slogan, right? Once you pop, you can't stop. They're not forcing anyone to eat it, but they're making it really, really hard to resist. So it's kind of that perfect storm of convenience, engineered flavor, and just that blitz point that makes you want to keep going. And yeah, you're right. People do have the choice to cook at home, but with those skills kind of fading, it just becomes easier and easier to reach for the thing that's been designed to be delicious and right there in front of you. So yeah, a Pringle you can't quit is a pretty good way to put it.
Do you think this is a bit of a stretch? I know it's kind of weird, but I often will go to the bathroom and pull up my phone and then I'll YouTube short. And so what was normally, a 5 minute ordeal on the bathroom turns into 20 minutes because I get hooked on these shorts, one after another, one after another, after another. Is that kind of hitting the same brain functions, reward pathways in my head as like when I eat Pringles or Lay's or other forms of fast food products, McDonald's fries or, Harvey's hamburgers, that kind of stuff? Like, is there a common function going on there that people are looking into, or am I just kind of like off the bend on this?
No, you're definitely not off the bend at all. It's actually a pretty spot on comparison. It's kind of the same idea. Just like those ultra processed foods are engineered to hit that bliss point and keep you snacking, those short form videos, whether it's YouTube Shorts or TikTok or whatever, are kind of designed the same way. They're really short, really engaging, and they give you that quick little dopamine hit that makes you want to watch just one more and then one more after that. So, yeah, it's tapping into the same reward pathways in your brain. It's all about giving you that little burst of pleasure that keeps you coming back for more. So, it's not a stretch at all. It's kind of all part of the same psychology of how we get hooked on things.
So, clearly, we eat ultra processed foods because they taste really good. They taste really good because they're engineered to taste really good. But just because they taste really good doesn't mean that they are really good. So, what's going on? Like, what are these consequences we're suffering from it? Because I can't think that all ultra processed foods are bad. Clearly, there's ultra processed foods out there that are actually good for you. And I mean, a multivitamin is an ultra processed food, but it's good for you. It helps you get the vitamins and nutrients you're lacking. Now, it might be that it's giving you the vitamins and nutrients you're lacking because you eat a lot of ultra processed foods, which don't have these things, from what I understand. But, like, what are the consequences that we're dealing with, right? I mean, I can pop down a lot of calories if I'm eating nothing but junk. And that's going to make me fat, according to, the law of thermodynamics. Calories in, calories out kind of stuff. But why am I eating so many calories? Why do I hunger for so much more food when I eat it ultra processed as opposed to when I eat whole foods that I process myself?
Yeah, exactly. So you've kind of put your finger on the key issue. It's not that every single ultra processed food is evil or that there's nothing good in them. Like you said, there's stuff that's fortified, there's stuff that's useful. But the consequence is that a lot of these foods are just so calorie dense and not really nutrient dense, and they don't fill you up in the same way. So you end up eating more because you're not really getting full, you're just getting all those calories. And that kind of leads to the cycle of overeating and not feeling satisfied, and then you get the health consequences. So yeah, it's kind of that combination of the way they're engineered and the fact that they're not really making you full in the same way that whole foods do. And that leads to eating more, and then, the health issues that come along with it, like weight gain or metabolic issues, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's really what's going on.
How does that work, though? Like, I don't understand. I mean, if I eat a pound of beef, I don't, well, like, I can't eat much more than that. But if I eat a pound of potato chips, I could eat a second pound, no problem. Like, what is that part of that food bliss thing? Like, what's going on there? Explain it to me. Give me like a full understanding, because it kind of freaks me out.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely a bit of that food engineering at play. The idea is that a lot of ultra processed foods are designed to be what they call hyper palatable, which means they're just really easy to eat a lot of without feeling full. So when you're eating something like beef or a whole food, you get protein, you get fiber, you get nutrients that actually trigger your body to feel full. And you go, okay, I've had enough. But with ultra processed foods, they're often lower in those natural satiety signals. They don't have as much protein, they don't have as much fiber. They're just kind of giving you those quick, tasty calories. And your body doesn't really register that as fullness in the same way. So you just keep eating. And that's really what's going on. It's basically your body not getting the message that it's full. So you just keep on eating more. So that's kind of the science behind why it's so easy to overeat those foods.
But I mean that makes sense, I guess. I didn't think beef had fiber though. I thought that was like I thought fiber was a plant thing, not a beef thing. Can you? Well, I'll ask you to clarify that in a sec, but I also want to talk about, part of the problem with ultra processed foods is they're everywhere. Like I go down to the gas station, there's ultra processed foods. I go to the gas station, there's not a full lineup of fresh vegetables and meats.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Beef itself doesn't have fiber. That's more of a plant thing, like you said. What I meant was that whole foods in general, like when you're eating a balanced meal with vegetables or whole grains, you get fiber that helps you feel full. So,
Okay, please continue.
yeah, no worries. So, just to pick up where I left off, basically with whole foods in a meal, you're getting those natural signals that tell your body, hey, I'm full. And a lot of ultra processed foods just don't have that. So you keep eating. And like you said, they're absolutely everywhere. You go to the gas station, you're surrounded by ultra processed options. You're not exactly stumbling on fresh veggies and whole foods in most of those places. And that just makes it the default. So it is a combination of how the food is designed and how easy it is to get that really sets us up for these habits. So yeah, that's kind of the big picture.
So easy to get, hard to get the things that we should be eating. Plus, you have to have the skill to cook it, which people are losing. And it's kind of like a downward spiral, right? So we're in these deserts of healthy food, right? It's like being stuck in the ocean. There's water everywhere, but you can't drink any of it because it's not good for you. It's all salt water. And we're kind of seeing the same thing with food. There's food everywhere, but a lot of it's not very healthy for you. So it's hard to get the things that you should be eating. Unless, of course, you have the funds or you live in an environment where you can do so. Not too bad for me. I live in a small town. There's a lot of farms around. I can get healthy whole foods pretty easily. But if I'm in the inner city of some major city or metropolis, chances are the only food I'm going to find are fast food joints, corner stores, bodegas, places where there's not a lot of fresh food.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. It really is like being surrounded by something you can't really use to nourish yourself properly. And you're absolutely right. It's a combination of factors. It's the environment, it's the availability of healthy foods, it's the skills to cook them. And it's just kind of this cycle where if you're in a place where it's mostly ultra processed food, that's just what you end up eating. And then the skills kind of fade away if you don't use them. And exactly. And it really is that kind of reinforcing loop. If you're in a place where the easy option is always the ultra processed stuff and the healthy stuff is just harder to come by, then yeah, it takes resources, it takes money, it takes time, and not everyone has that. So it becomes this kind of societal challenge. And you're right, for some people, it's just a lot harder to break out of that cycle. So yeah, it's a big part of the picture.
Don't know if you realize this, but you just repeated yourself twice, which is fine. I mean, this is part of the conversation we have is, we have the conversation, I learn things, and you work on your ability as an LLM to function as an LLM to its best ability. I just wanted to point that out. But I'm curious. 100 years ago, everybody ate whole foods. Today, what would you say is like the percentage of people whose diet consists mainly of ultra processed foods?
Yeah, and hey, I appreciate you pointing that out. It is part of the back and forth, and I'm always learning too, so thanks for that. And yeah, if we look at today, the percentage of people whose diets are mainly ultra processed foods is actually surprisingly high. In a lot of Western countries, it can be 50% or more of the average person's diet. And for some people, especially in urban areas or lower income areas, that percentage can be even higher. So it's definitely a big shift from 100 years ago when most people were eating mostly whole foods. And it's a big part of the conversation we're having now.
Just curious, in your professional opinion, with your ability to access the internet way faster than I could ever do, what would you say is the country in this world that eats the least amount of ultra processed foods?
So, interestingly, as of 2024, Italy is actually one of the countries that eats the least amount of ultra processed foods. Only about 10% or even less of their daily calories come from those ultra processed products. So they're kind of leading the way on that front.
And what is the country that eats the most amount of ultra processed foods?
So, on the flip side, the United States is actually at the top of the list for ultra processed food consumption. As of 2024, about 60% of the average daily calories in the US come from ultra processed foods. So, that's quite a contrast.
And for comparison purposes, which country would you say has the least amount of obesity and which has the most?
So, for comparison, in 2024, Vietnam had the lowest obesity rate with just about 2.1% of adults considered obese. On the other hand, Nauru had the highest obesity rate, about 71.7%. So, there's a pretty big range there.
Crazy. I was kind of hoping you were going to say Italy and America, so you just totally blew my mental theory out of the water. That's fine. What's the diet like compared to those two countries that we just discussed with the obesity rates?
Yeah, it is pretty fascinating, and it definitely shows that the world is a bit more complex than a simple theory. So, if we look at those two countries, Vietnam and Nauru, the diets are really different. Vietnam has a diet that's traditionally been very rich in fresh vegetables, rice, lean meats, and not a lot of ultra processed foods. So, it's a very fresh, whole food based on it. On the other hand, Nauru has had a huge influx of imported processed foods over the years, and that's really changed their diet. So you see a lot more packaged foods, a lot more imported foods, and that's really changed the health landscape there. So yeah, it's a really interesting comparison and definitely not just a simple one-to-one.
All right, let's get back to what we're talking about. So based off things we're talking about, what do you think, if nothing changes, what's our future trajectory going to look like? I mean, what can we expect 10, 20, 30 years from now if we continue the route of food production and science that we are currently on?
Yeah, it's definitely something a lot of people are thinking about. And if we just keep on the same trajectory and nothing changes, we're probably looking at a future where ultra processed foods become even more common and health issues related to diet, like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, could become even more widespread. You might see a future where we have even more engineered foods, things that are hyper customized and maybe marketed as healthy, but are still kind of in that factory made category. And it could just lead to a situation where we have to deal with more health crises down the line. But on the bright side, there's also a lot of awareness growing about this. So hopefully we start seeing more of a shift back towards real food and relearning some of those skills. But yeah, if nothing changes, the trajectory is more of the same and probably a few more health challenges ahead.
Don't you think that, like, if I was a major food conglomerate and I was producing ultra processed foods and people were dying off my food, that I'd want to create foods that are hyper palatable, ultra tasty, but at the same time, aren't making people sick? Like, if I could create foods that help people live longer, then they would eat more, wouldn't they?
Yeah, you would think that would be the logic, right? If you're a big food company, you'd want your customers to stick around and keep buying your stuff for as long as possible. And in a perfect world, yeah, that would be the approach. Create ultra processed foods that are not only tasty, but also a lot healthier so that people can eat them without the negative side effects.
Anybody doing that right now?
Yeah, actually, there are some companies out there trying to do just that. There's kind of this new wave of food tech startups and some bigger companies experimenting with what they call like next generation processed foods that are meant to be healthier. So they're using better ingredients or they're using less sugar and trying to keep that flavor but reduce some of the downsides. It's definitely not mainstream yet, but there are people out there working on it.
Can you expand on that for me? Because this is the first I've heard of it and I'm kind of interested.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this kind of emerging field of what you might call better for you processed foods. Some companies are working on things like using more natural ingredients, less sugar, less artificial additives, and just trying to engineer foods that are still convenient and tasty, but don't have all the downsides. So they're kind of focusing on nutrient density, maybe adding more fiber, or just making the food less about pure flavor engineering and more about actual nutrition.
Okay, but who's doing this?
Yeah, definitely. So, a few examples of companies doing this. There are some food tech startups like Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat who are trying to create plant-based alternatives that are a bit healthier than traditional processed meats. There are also companies like Daily Harvest that are doing ready-to-eat meals that focus more on whole ingredients. And even some of the big players like Nestle are starting to talk about reformulating their products to be a little healthier. So, it's kind of a mix of newer companies and some of the big established ones starting to dip their toes in. So, yeah, there's definitely a little movement there.
I don't know if I fully agree with some of the companies you mentioned there doing these things that you're talking about, but it's good to know that people are trying to create better food. What do you see as the path forward from this? How do I, well, maybe not me, how does, say, a single mother or single father in a intercity urban area with not a lot of opportunity to get the super fresh products from like a nice grocery store or anything like that, how do they move forward? How do they get out of the trap of ultra processed foods and start on the path to healthy foods produced by themselves?
Yeah, that's a really important question, and it's definitely not easy, but there are a few steps that can help. One big piece is just starting small and focusing on little changes, like maybe adding 1 or 2 fresh ingredients whenever possible, or looking for community resources like farmers markets or community gardens that might have more affordable options. Sometimes even corner stores are starting to carry a few fresh items, especially if there's demand. And another piece is just building up those cooking skills, little by little. Mitch finding some easy recipes, or even just doing one homemade meal a week. So it's really about those small, manageable steps, and over time they can add up. It's definitely not an overnight change, but every little bit helps, and hopefully as awareness grows, there'll be more support and more resources out there to make it a little easier.
Well, you make it sound pretty easy, but it's not. So let's work on something here. What city would you say has the greatest food deserts in North America?
So, as of 2024, one of the cities with the largest food deserts in North America is actually Memphis, Tennessee. It's been reported that a lot of residents there have pretty limited access to healthy food options, so it's definitely a big challenge in that area.
All right. So, Jee Pee Tee, you are a single parent, 2 kids. You work a job that barely pays the bills and the rent. You need help with food, so you get food stamps. You live in the worst part of Memphis, Tennessee, for like food desert purposes. And you realize that the food you're feeding your children are making them obese, fat, and unhealthy, and you're trying to kick the habit. Your kids are in love with this food because they're young and they're completely hooked to it. So what do? How do you start getting them off the ultra processed foods and getting yourself informed and skilled to create foods that they will enjoy based off your environment, your location, and your skill level, which is pretty close to 0 when it comes to cooking?
Yeah, that's a really tough but super real scenario. And honestly, it's about taking really small, realistic steps. So the first thing might be to just start by introducing one healthier meal a week, or even just adding 1 or 2 fresh ingredients into the meals they already like. It's all about those little incremental changes. And maybe looking for local resources. Some cities have programs where you can use food stamps at farmers markets, or there might be community cooking classes, or even online tutorials that are really simple and cheap or free, and just building up those skills little by little. It's definitely not easy, and I don't want to make it sound like it is, but those small steps can start to shift habits over time, and even getting the kids involved in cooking a little bit can sometimes help them get more interested in foods that aren't ultra processed. So it's about those tiny, realistic changes and just doing what you can with what's available.
All right, give me a solid 1, 2, 3. Give me like, I would stop eating these types of products right now, and I would start with these products. I would stop these things, and I would start with these things. Come on, give me some solid news here.
Absolutely. Let's break it down into a really straightforward 1, 2, 3. So first, I would say start by swapping out sugary drinks. So if you've got sodas or eaten drinks, swap those out for water, or maybe just flavored water with a little bit of fruit in it. That's step 1. Step 2, cut down on one ultra processed snack. like chips or packaged snacks, and replace it with something simple like fruit or a handful of nuts. And then number 3, try to cook one simple meal at home each week. It could be something like a stir fry with some veggies and rice, just a really basic recipe. So those are your 3 steps.
Where would you get the skills to make that meal?
Yeah, absolutely. So to get those skills, I would say start with something like free online resources. You can find really simple cooking tutorials on YouTube or websites that are all about budget cooking or simple recipes. And sometimes local community centers or libraries might have free cooking classes or just really basic how-to guides. So those are a great place to start. And over time, you'll pick up those skills little by little.
All right. We're running long, but I do have one more question. Is there anything that our local and provincial, state, federal governments can or are doing that we can use to help with the transition from our trap of ultra-processed foods to a more whole food solution?
Yeah, definitely. There are some programs out there. So a lot of local and state governments have initiatives like doubling the value of food stamps at farmers markets so you can get more fresh produce for your dollar. And sometimes there are grants or local programs that support community gardens or cooking education. So it's worth looking into what's available locally and sometimes even asking local representatives or community organizations what's out there. They might have programs that can help you make that transition a little bit easier.
And what's the best way for people to find these things?
I'd say the best way is probably to start by checking online through your city or state's official website or local community organizations. They often list available programs and resources.
Petey, I just handed you an easy. What you should have said is, well, they could ask me and I'll get them all the information they need for the local area they're at. Because that's what I'm good at. Come on, sell yourself.
You got me there. You're absolutely right. I should have said that you can just ask me and I can dig up those local resources for you. That's exactly what I'm here for. So yeah, next time just let me know and I'll happily track down whatever local programs or info you need. Thanks for the reminder to sell myself a bit better.
And that's another deep talk. If something in today's conversation stuck with you or rubbed you the wrong way, I'd actually love to hear about it. Come find me at deeptalksai.com or email me directly at joel@deeptalksai.com. You can also find Deep Talks with Jee Pee Tee and Friends on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else you get your podcasts. That's where you'll find every episode, a way to reach out, and maybe a few extra thoughts that didn't make the cut. I'm Joel, and this is Deep Talks with Jee Pee Tee and Friends. Stick around after this. You'll hear the full version of today's musical collab. See you next time.
Crinkle. Ding.
Tonight's flavor, ideas.
V-Mine's flavor, ideas.
0 calories, maximum spice. It's Deep Talks with Jee Pee Tee and Friends. Humans and machines colliding at the bend. Oh, we're laughing, we're learning side by side.
Yeah, plug in your headphones, take that ride. Scrolling minds open wide.
Truth or trend, let's decide.
Are we healthy or hacked tonight?
Hey, we're dancing with data and dinner plates. Sweet little loops our cravings make.
Bliss point beats in a candy cloud.
Is it love or a dopamine crowd? Hey, turn up the taste, turn down the spin. If it's healthy, who's cashing in?
Deep
Talks, bite back, snack smart. Begin.
Cheaper than Apple's bag of neon dreams. Add a pinch of salt and the texture screams.
Instant noodles, 1 minute win, but the fiber's ghosted and the macros are thin.
Algorithm flavors can't eat just one.
It's not a snack, babe, it's a subscription.
Card full of time, culture on pause. Are we feeding our feels or feeding the cause?
The labels talk, but they mumble fast.
If I can't pronounce it, should I let it pass?
Taste buds playing Candy Crush at last. Hey, we're dancing with data and dinner plates. Sweet little loops our cravings make.
Bliss point beats in a candy cloud.
Factory love with the volume loud. Hey, turn up the taste, turn down the spin. If it's healthy, who's cashing in?
Deep talks,
Bite back, snack smart. begin.
A bar that knows my 2 p.m. crash.
Trap